My name is Ava Mercer. I'm 29 years old, and this morning I stepped off a private jet with my 5-year-old daughter Eliza onto the very soil of the town that once cast me out like a stranger. 11 years ago, I walked away from this place in the pouring rain, carrying nothing but a backpack and a broken heart. No plan, no money, just the sting of my mother's final words still echoing in my ears. You're no daughter of mine. Why? Because I said no. No to the life they tried to force on me. No to the man I was expected to marry. No to being bought and packaged as someone else's prize. That single word cost me everything: my home, my family, my identity, but it also gave me something I never had before: a future I could finally claim as my own. And now, I've returned, not with shame, not with an apology, but with strength, with dignity, with a child who is being raised to know that her voice matters, her choices are her own, and love doesn't come with conditions. The moment we stepped out of that car, the look on my parents' faces, it wasn't anger. It wasn't even regret. It was disbelief, because they weren't looking at the girl they kicked out. They were looking at a woman who built an empire from nothing. A woman who turned silence into strategy and scars into strength. If you've ever been told your dreams are too loud, if you've ever been told your no makes you ungrateful, if you've ever been left to figure life out alone, then this story is for you. Stay with me. Because what happened after I walked away became the most important story I'll ever tell. This isn't about revenge. It's about resilience. It's about the journey back, not to ask for acceptance, but to remind them. I never needed permission to become who I am. People saw our house and thought we were perfect. White shutters, a pristine lawn, seasonal wreaths on the front door, like something out of a lifestyle magazine. From the outside, we were the Mercers, polished, put together, and respected. But behind that door, it was all control, silence, and suffocating expectations. My mother, Evelyn Mercer, ran our house like a kingdom. Everything had to be spotless. Her image, her house, her daughter. She wore perfection like armor. Her hair never moved out of place, her smile was always practiced, and her eyes were always watching. Not lovingly, strategically. She didn't raise a daughter, she tried to shape an accessory. My father, Gregory, was the quiet type. He was a partner at a respected financial firm, always buried in numbers, always in the background. I used to look at him across the dinner table, silently begging him to say something when Mom's words cut too deep. Sometimes he'd glance at me with a flicker of sympathy, but he never stood up, never once challenged her. By the time I was 15, I already knew what role I was supposed to play. Wear the dresses, smile politely, stay small, dream quietly. But I couldn't do it. I didn't want cotillion, I wanted the debate team. I didn't want to volunteer at her charity luncheons. I wanted to work at the bookstore downtown. I didn't want to be told who I could become. I wanted to discover that on my own. My mother called it rebellion. I called it breathing. "You're embarrassing this family," she'd hiss between gritted teeth. "Other girls your age understand how to behave." Dinner became a daily battle. She criticized my clothes, my tone, my posture, even my laugh. And my father, he stared at his plate every single time. She would say I was difficult, that I had an attitude problem, that no man would ever want a girl who acted like me. But deep down, I wasn't trying to be difficult. I was trying to be free. And freedom, in the Mercer household, was the greatest sin of all. By the time I reached my senior year of high school, it wasn't just about controlling what I wore or who I spent time with. My mother had moved on to the final step of her plan, securing my future the way she saw fit. That meant finding me a husband, not someone I loved, not someone who knew me, just someone who looked good on paper. His name was Caleb Whitmore. He was 33. I was 18. Heir to a real estate empire, recently divorced, handsome in the way magazine covers prefer, polished, confident, calculated. My mother adored him. "He's successful, comes from a good family, and he's taken a real interest in you," she gushed. "You should be flattered." But Caleb didn't feel like a man interested in me. He felt like someone circling a business acquisition. He'd come to dinners, flash that cold, toothy smile, and talk to me like I was a resume. He made comments about how I was maturing nicely, how I'd clean up well for formal events. His hand would brush too long against my lower back. His eyes would linger where they shouldn't. Every instinct in me screamed, "Run!" Meanwhile, I had a secret. Late at night, when the house was quiet, I'd pull out college brochures I had hidden under my mattress. I had dreams. I wanted to study business, learn marketing, build something real, and I'd already applied. 7 schools all on my own, using babysitting money to pay the fees. When the acceptance letter came from Pacific West University, I cried. It felt like hope printed on paper. That same week, my mother invited Caleb's family over for dinner. She was glowing. "We have such exciting news," she said, smoothing my hair like I was a doll. "Everything I've done has been building toward this." I knew then. She was planning my engagement. The table was set, the guest list ready, and the future she wanted for me laid out like a wedding menu. But I had other plans, and no intention of letting them marry me off like a prize to be handed over. The night of the dinner was surreal. The chandelier sparkled, the china gleamed, everything looked picture perfect except me. I sat stiff in a dress my mother picked, hands trembling in my lap. Across the table sat Caleb, grinning like he already owned me, and beside him, a velvet box. I didn't eat, I couldn't, when he dropped to one knee, opened that box, and said, "Ava Mercer, will you marry me?" The air left the room. I stood, whispered, "I need some air," and slipped through the patio doors before I collapsed. Moments later, he followed. "You were supposed to say yes," he said flatly, like a CEO disappointed in a failed merger. "This is all very sudden," I replied, trying to steady my voice. He scoffed. "This isn't sudden. It's an arrangement. My father supports your father's career. Your mother gets her perfect image. I get a wife." "And what do I get?" I asked. He didn't even blink. "Comfort, security, a life women dream of." I stepped back from him. "I want an education," I said, "a career, my own voice." He smiled coldly. "Your future is in that box," he said, pointing to the ring. "You just turned it down." And with that, I knew. I walked back into the house and saw the change instantly. The Whitmores were leaving. My mother's face was pale with fury. My father wouldn't even meet my eyes. When the door closed, she turned to me with venom in her voice. "What have you done?" I said no. "You're a disgrace." And then she slapped me. The sound cracked through the room like thunder. "Get out," she whispered. "If you're too good for the life we've built for you, then leave." I walked upstairs in silence, packed a backpack with a few clothes, my acceptance letter, and the money I'd saved. My father stood by the door. "I'm sorry," he said, pressing $300 into my hand, and then he opened it. I stepped out into the rain, alone, uncertain, scared, but more free than I had ever been in my life. The first night on my own was cold. Rain soaked through my clothes. My cheeks still burned from the slap. I stood under a bus stop shelter with a backpack and a phone. My entire life boiled down to a few damp belongings and a single choice. Call the friend I had, or call the family who hurt me. I chose Julia. She didn't ask questions, just showed up. Her car was old, the heat barely worked, and her floor mats were already covered in crumbs. But when I climbed in, she looked at me and said, "You're safe now." And for the first time that day, I believed it. Her parents let me crash on their couch, no judgment, no lectures, just warm food, extra blankets, and silence that didn't sting. Within a week, I enrolled in community college using my acceptance letter as proof of graduation. The university would have to wait. I couldn't afford tuition, but I could start somewhere. I worked at a coffee shop in the mornings, grocery store shifts on weekends, babysat in the evenings, and every night I collapsed into sleep so heavy I barely dreamed. My first apartment was a studio no bigger than my high school bedroom. The pipes groaned and the wallpaper peeled. I had one plate, one fork, and a mattress on the floor, but it was mine. And in that space, between exhaustion and determination, I found purpose. I kept going, one class at a time, one paycheck at a time. I stayed up late writing essays. I walked miles when my car broke down. I ate ramen for weeks just to buy textbooks. But each day I grew. No help, no shortcuts, only grit. And then, one Tuesday morning, I spilled a latte at work, and everything changed. Because the woman I spilled it on didn't get mad. She smiled. And 2 days later, she handed me a business card. "Come see me," she said. "I think you're meant for something more." And that was the first door that opened. Because hard work doesn't whisper forever. Eventually, it gets noticed. By the time I turned 26, I had a degree, a title, and a small team working under me. The girl who once stood in the rain with a backpack now sat in meetings, pitched campaigns, signed contracts, and yet, one unexpected moment would shift everything again. His name was Jason Whitaker. He walked into my life not as a partner, but as a client. He owned a chain of sustainable home goods stores and was looking to expand nationally. His team was thorough, his pitch clear, but what stood out was him. He didn't talk like other CEOs, he asked questions, real ones. What's your mission? What do you stand for? What do your campaigns make people feel? At the end of our meeting, he shook my hand and said, "You see people, not just profits. That's rare." We won the contract, and over the next few months, we worked closely. Strategy calls turned into deeper conversations. Lunch meetings lingered into evenings. One night, as we packed up after a long pitch review, he asked, "Would it be okay if I kiss you QRI Huawei Fei UCK so ori wa and bawi wa?" He asked. That alone made me pause. Respect, where I had once known control. Gentleness, where I had once seen power plays. I said yes. Our relationship grew with the same intention I had built my business with. Steady, mutual, rooted in real partnership. He celebrated every win, never once dimming my light to protect his own. When I secured my first $1 million client, he surprised me with champagne and skydiving tickets. I laughed. "Are you serious?" He grinned. "Life's too short to keep putting off the things that scare and excite you." And so we jumped. Together. Later that year, when I found out I was pregnant, I panicked. All my plans, my perfectly timed roadmap, felt like they were slipping. Jason didn't flinch. "We'll figure it out together," he said. "You don't have to do this alone." And in that moment, I believed him because I finally understood real love doesn't trap you, it frees you. 5 years had passed since Eliza was born. She had Jason's green eyes, my stubbornness, and a curiosity that filled every corner of the world she entered. She was growing fast, too fast, and asking bigger questions. One night, as I tucked her into bed, she asked, "Mommy, why don't I have grandparents like Zoe?" It hit me like a punch to the chest. I hadn't spoken to my parents in 11 years, no phone calls, no letters, no apologies, just silence. Later that same week, I got an email from a distant cousin. Brief, informational. "Your father had emergency heart surgery. He's recovering. Thought you should know." No request for a visit, no attempt at reconciliation, just a fact. And suddenly, I was back in that moment, the rain, the slap, the door closing behind me. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I was a mother now, and Eliza deserved answers. Not necessarily a relationship, but clarity. I sat on the patio that night with Jason. The air was still. The silence hung heavy between us. "My father almost died," I said, "and I wouldn't have known." Jason didn't speak right away. Then he asked, "Does that bother you?" I nodded. Not because I'm ready to forgive them, but because they don't even know Eliza exists. And maybe that matters more than I thought. So I made a decision, not for them, for me, for her. Turner and Mercer was opening a new regional office. We had narrowed it down to 2 cities. On paper, Denver made sense. But in my heart, I knew where we were going. We'd open the next branch in my hometown. I would return. Not as the disgraced daughter, not as the girl they cast out, but as a woman who built something from the ground up and who was ready to face the past. I wasn't coming back for revenge. I didn't need validation. I needed peace. And for Eliza, I needed to know if the people who once turned their backs on me were capable of facing who I had become. I didn't tell them we were coming. I needed to see their faces, unfiltered, unrehearsed, the moment they saw me again. I wanted to know if anything had changed. We flew into a quiet regional airport. Eliza was bouncing with excitement, asking 100 questions about the jet, about the town, about the people she had never met. For her, this was an adventure. For me, it was walking into a memory I thought I'd buried. The rental car hummed down roads I once knew like the back of my hand. Street corners, grocery stores, old schools, nothing had changed, except me. The house looked the same, stately, familiar, but faded. The white trim was chipped, the flower beds were sparse, the perfection was gone. Eliza pressed her face to the window. "Is this it? Where you grew up?" I nodded. "Yeah, it's where it all started." She smiled. "It's pretty." I took a deep breath, helped her out of the car, and together we walked the path I hadn't set foot on in over a decade. I rang the doorbell. It was the same sound. That carefully chosen Westminster chime my mother once installed to impress guests. And then, the door opened. My father stood there, older and thinner than I remembered. He stared, mouth open slightly like he was seeing a ghost. "Ava," he whispered. My mother's voice came from inside. "Who is it, Gregory?" When she appeared behind him, her eyes landed on me, and everything stopped. I spoke first. "I thought it was time for a visit, and time you met your granddaughter." I stepped aside, revealing Eliza, who clutched my hand and looked up with a small wave. There was silence, and then my father stepped back and opened the door wider. "Would you like to come in?" We walked into a house that once made me feel small. Now I stood taller than ever. And while part of me expected walls to close in again, they didn't. Instead, for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was returning home. I felt like I was rewriting what home could mean, if they were willing. The living room hadn't changed. Same floral couch, same crystal figurines, same photo frames, though none of me passed 18. It was like they had paused time the moment I left and hadn't dared touch it since. But even more startling was a scrapbook. My father brought it down after a long silence. He set it on the coffee table between us, right next to Eliza's untouched juice box. Inside were clippings, pages and pages of my life. Business Insider, Marketing Weekly, local interviews, awards, company milestones, photos from events they'd never been invited to. They had watched me, quietly, from the shadows. I didn't know whether to feel touched or furious. "You kept all of this?" I asked. "We never stopped being proud," my father said softly. "Then why didn't you ever reach out?" They exchanged a look. "We thought you wouldn't want to hear from us," my mother whispered. She looked older now, less polished, more human. "I was wrong," she added, her voice trembling. "About everything. I just didn't know how to fix it." I didn't say anything for a long time. Then I leaned forward, folded my hands, and spoke the words I had practiced in my head for years. "If we're going to rebuild anything, there need to be boundaries." My father nodded immediately. My mother hesitated, then slowly agreed. "I'm not your child anymore," I said. "I'm a mother, a wife, a CEO. And if you want to be in Eliza's life, it has to be on our terms." "Understood," my father said. "No more control," I added. "No backhanded advice, no pushing. She will grow up knowing her voice matters." There was a pause, then my mother said quietly, "That's what I should have given you." I stood up, feeling the weight of generations shift just a little. For the first time, I wasn't begging for a place at their table. I was offering them a seat at mine, one they could either accept or walk away from again. Because I wasn't afraid of losing them anymore. I had already learned how to thrive without them. It's strange standing in the same house where you were once told you weren't welcome and feeling nothing like the girl who walked out that door. That night, after dinner with my parents, after putting Eliza to bed in the hotel room, I sat alone with a cup of tea and stared at the ceiling. So much had changed. And yet, part of me still carried that girl in the rain, the one with the sting on her cheek, a backpack full of dreams, and nowhere to go. She still lives inside me, but she's not in pain anymore. She's proud, because everything I built, I built from scratch. No safety net, no family support, just grit, grace, and a refusal to let someone else write my story. For years, I thought success meant proving them wrong, showing them what they lost when they threw me away. But now I realize it was never about them. It was about reclaiming my voice. And more than that, it was about breaking the cycle. Because Eliza, she'll grow up knowing what real love looks like. She'll never be told that her dreams are too big, that her independence makes her difficult, that her value depends on someone else's approval. She'll grow up in a home where boundaries are honored and choices are celebrated, where love is not a contract, but a promise. And that, more than the degrees, the offices, the jet, or the headlines, that is my real legacy. People think the opposite of control is chaos. But really, it's freedom. And freedom is the most sacred kind of peace. I didn't go back to ask for anything. I went back to offer something, a chance to connect if they were willing to meet me where I stood, not where they left me. And for the first time, they did. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not forever. But sometimes healing starts with one honest conversation, and one woman brave enough to come home not as a daughter begging for acceptance, but as someone who had already found it within herself. So now I turn to you. Yes, you, listening to this story. Maybe you're lying awake wondering if walking away from the people who were supposed to love you is ever the right choice. Maybe you're carrying the weight of silence, the ache of not being seen, not being heard. Or maybe you've already walked through that storm, and you're still wondering if you made the right call. Let me say this clearly, choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's survival. You don't owe anyone your silence. You don't have to shrink so someone else can shine. You don't have to become someone else's version of acceptable just to feel safe. You can walk away. You can start over. You can choose peace over approval. And you can come back stronger, not because they finally accepted you, but because you finally accepted yourself. My story is just one of many. There are thousands, millions of people who've stood where I stood, at the edge of everything familiar, with trembling hands, soaked cheeks, and the terrifying freedom of starting from nothing. But here's the truth. Nothing becomes everything when you build it with courage. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you of your own journey or gave you hope for one you're still in the middle of, please let me know in the comments. I want to hear your voice. And if you know someone who needs this story, a sister, a friend, a daughter, a version of yourself from years ago, share this with them. Sometimes all we need is to hear that we're not alone. And if you'd like to hear more true stories like this, of resilience, healing, and the long road to freedom, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Your story matters, your voice matters. And no matter how it began, you get to decide how it ends. Thank you for listening to mine.
Now go write yours.